Hello again, everyone. I want to share something in my life and my journey that I've held a lot of value in. It's not something that I was taught from anywhere, but something I just found myself doing naturally because I sensed that it was right. For most of my spiritual journey, and what I deliberately did was not share any of my astral projection experiences for many years. As a lot of you know, I started having these experiences consciously over 11 years ago now, and it was only up until 10 months ago that I began to share these experiences on this channel and in my book. So don't misinterpret the title of this video. Yes, I am telling you to stop sharing your experiences, but I'm more saying stop sharing them so carelessly without any mindfulness. And I'm saying this so that if you exercise this, you may be able to have experiences more often. Now, I'm going to explain this, but remember what I'm saying here is not to tell you what to do. The point is, by contemplating all of this, it should encourage you to share or not share your experiences in a more conscious way. And we're going to understand why this is important for many people out there that I've observed, and generally for people new to all of this. A quick thank you to Mike, Lennart, and Dixie who joined on Patreon. Be sure to join on Discord as we have a live Q&A voice chat this Sunday as we do every month. If you want to support these videos too, just see the Patreon link below. Now, let's explain this quite basic teaching about why one should be careful when sharing experiences. As a spiritual aspirant, practitioner, meditator begins to make progress, they naturally start to have experiences, spiritual experiences. One of them, of course, being astral projection. Now, when they have these experiences for the first time, many people become so excited that they start to share these experiences willy-nilly with everyone without considering whether they should do that or not. And of course, many of us have been there, right? Including myself. When I had my first experience, I told my close friends and family, but I quickly sensed why I shouldn't have done that. And obviously, I share many of my experiences now, right? So we'll see what I really mean here. And on that note, there are still many experiences I have chosen not to share because I really have no reason to, and or they were very personal, intimate experiences which were very special to me, to me alone. And also, some of these experiences are probably not really believable too. My focus, my journey and purpose here is to not to be of controversy with entertaining you with experiences, but my ultimate purpose is to help you experience this dimension of life for yourself, especially because there are so many experienced people out there who know about this ability but don't bother to teach it. And I think that's a real shame. That is what has inspired me to start all of this, writing books and making these episodes in the first place. So, yes, and there's a reason why astral projection was kept secret and only talked about in occult circles for many centuries until recent times with the interconnectedness of today. That's the beautiful thing about the modern world, that many spiritual secrets have all been brought to light. However, a consequence of that is people easily devalue or overlook these spiritual mysteries. So, even though these spiritual mysteries are largely in the public domain, we should also value and honor our spiritual experiences like secret treasures and not be too liberal with them, because let's face it, we're still living in a deeply sleeping matrix with most of humanity extremely unconscious. And this even exists in many spiritual groups and even in astral projection groups. So I'm going to elaborate, of course. To understand what I'm saying here, let's keep in mind and remember that the greatest spiritual aspiration in spirituality is for our mind, which is currently full of ego, to merge with the soul, our consciousness. This is a challenging thing to do because we have the ego. The ego distorts and covers our perception with mud, making us blind to the greater reality of life, of consciousness. If you've ever heard of looking behind the veil is the ego, as seen on this diagram on the screen. To merge with the soul, our consciousness, which you could also call God or the self, is to realize it. Hence the term self realization or God realization. And so, to realize this higher nature, it is natural for us to begin having spiritual experiences, obviously, one of them being astral projection. Perhaps go and see my video about enlightenment and going beyond the veil. So, as we all know, there is a certain struggle on the path to attaining such experiences, right? We're all familiar with this. It's not a simple task. Well, at least to the ego, it is perceived as a struggle, right? Our goal, our striving, is to go beyond the veil of the ego, or more precisely, to dissolve the ego, or at least minimize it so that it's not always in the way. And this is the important point here. We strive to go beyond the ego. But when we start sharing experiences, it's very easy to go back into the state of ego. That's the problem. That's what you should be careful about when sharing experiences. There are many types of ego, many facets of it, many faces of it, in fact. Just the normal egoic traits of ordinary everyday people. But a spiritual ego is one of the most trickiest to handle or even become aware of in the first place, especially if you are a beginner at all of this. So this is really crucial advice to any novice, really. It should be one of the basic guidelines before attaining spiritual experiences. Be sure to check out my episode about the spiritual ego as well. So, let me be more specific here. There are various reasons why you should exercise mindfulness before sharing experiences. And just one of those reasons are talking about them simply too soon after you've experienced it. Let me explain. When you begin to start working towards these experiences, you're meditating, staying grounded, and then suddenly, one day, you have an interesting experience. But since, because of your fascination and perhaps also desperation to attain these experiences, you cling onto the past memory of that experience and hold it tightly, smothering it with all of your over-analyzations, and then spend also a lot of time sharing your experiences with others, asking things like whether it was a lucid dream or astral projection, instead of working towards more experiences and gaining this knowledge for yourself. So, where has your practice gone now? Where has your meditative state gone that allowed you to go into that state of mind to astral project in the first place? You've become too busy, concerned, and preoccupied with an experience that you may have thought was significant. And honestly, if you're that doubtful about it, then it probably wasn't even that significant. So, really, what I'm talking about here is how the ego arises when sharing spiritual experiences, or more precisely, it is the ego that usually wants to share experiences. And as I've said in the past, the ego is not just one thing, but a plethora of different voices and opinions and emotions within us. And so, one ego feels frustrated with not being able to discern whether an experience was legitimate or what it means, and thus begins to pester others, instead of that individual recognizing that they simply need to continue their practice to deepen their intuition, wisdom, and also gain more experiences. Let me tell you, if you persist deeply, sincerely, you can get to a point where intuition can become a vast pool of direct knowledge. This is more for a later episode, but the main point here is to value practice over sharing experiences. Being confused is essentially an egoic state. The intellect is unenlightened, and thinking about it too much doesn't help. We just need to continue practicing. So, another reason why we should avoid sharing these experiences, and you may have guessed it by now, it's quite an obvious one, is pride. I don't think this aspect needs much explanation, right? Many people share experiences and boast and show off to prove to others that they're magical or have powers. So, you see, as I said earlier, the high aspiration of a practitioner, a yogi, a devotee, is to merge with what is known as Atman, the soul. And we do this by cleaning the veil and muck of the ego. Yet, if you have an experience and you add more muck with the ego of pride, giving your ego more sense of self, rather than sensing the divine, then this is just counterproductive. It's a totally illogical thing to do. Do you think your consciousness is going to grant you more experiences if you're adding more pride every time you have an experience? Absolutely not. Because clearly spiritual experiences adds more ego to you, and your consciousness wants you to awaken, not become more egoic. In this sense, for many people, astral projection does not become a tool for self realization, but devolves into a false sense of spiritual superiority. It produces in the mind a false sense of importance. I'm reminded once again of the Native American shaman that I've quoted a lot in the past, who taught that self importance is the force generated by man's self image, by our image of ourselves. And so the path to awakening is literally about dissolving self importance. As he famously said, self importance is man's greatest enemy. What weakens him is feeling offended by the deeds and misdeeds of his fellow men. Self importance requires that one spend most of one's life offended by something or someone. As long as a man feels that he is the most important thing in the world, he cannot really appreciate the world around him. So, there are many examples of how this emotion of pride can be sensed within. It could say things like, wow, I had this experience. I'm so much better than others. I must be so awakened and pure that God gifts me with these experiences. Or perhaps you have experiences with guides and spirits, etc. And you wake up and say, wow, I'm so important. I must be a vessel of truth for humanity. I am the chosen one, right? I have spiritual powers, God consciousness. These are all just illusions and add to the veil of ego, which blinds your perception and sense of the true divine within, which is beyond all of these egoic thoughts and sense of self. These aren't just egos of pride, but can also give birth to arrogance, vanity, and self-centeredness, and just too much self-involvement. You're making love with yourself, right? So remember that whatever you experience, however blissful, however transcendental, beautiful, and profound, is also found within every living being, within every person, every atom in existence. To separate yourself as better than others is to take yourself out of this great field of oneness. And to go even deeper here, and what I really want to teach is that it's not actually about whether you tell people or not. No, you can practice not telling anyone about your experiences and still have those feelings of pride, vanity, and superiority. You see, it all starts from within, whether you tell people or not. It's not just about what you say with your mouth, it's about what you think and feel. Remember that Spirituality and experiences are for you and you alone, nobody else. There's nothing to prove to anyone. Another issue here amongst all of this is that people also get jealous and competitive. Astral projection is a very sought after experience these days, and many people become desperate to achieve it. That jealousy can turn to hate, confusions, and feelings of superiority and inferiority, especially when experiences aren't shared in an enlightening and kind way. And there's also the problem of sharing negative experiences in a fear mongering way, too. So we have a whole mess of implications here. But at the basis of all this, we should value and honor as a kind of devotee of consciousness, right? We should honor and value our experiences. It's like looking for treasure for many years. And when you finally find it, would you really just call every person you know and tell them about it? Or even worse, go online in public, take a picture of your treasure and just tell a bunch of strangers about it publicly? Half of them won't even appreciate your experience, your treasure, and just tell you it's nothing, it means nothing, right? They don't value you, they don't believe you, they don't take you seriously, they don't respect you, they don't even know who you are. I've talked about this before, about the destructive nature of the current collective consciousness of most of humanity. Perhaps you disagree, perhaps you want to believe that humanity is this beautiful, loving species that you can trust. No, posting your experiences online is like finding that beautiful treasure, which is like a delicate flower gifted from a celestial angel, and shoving it into hell for demons to eat and tear up. Now, perhaps you're strong of mind and don't mind that, but a big danger here for many people, and it happens to many people, I've seen it too many times, is that the doubts, misinformation, and skepticisms of other people become your own doubts and skepticisms and misunderstandings. So we have to be careful who we share experiences with. To talk more crudely, it's like people taking a dump on your experiences, a dump on your wonderful treasure. And, personally, I sensed this weakness in me earlier on my path. And one of the reasons I never shared my experiences was because I knew that if I did, I would have gotten that ignorant, confused look you get from people who don't understand what you're talking about. And back then, the thought of people doing that when I'm sharing something more valuable than anything humanity has ever discovered made me feel awful. So I stayed extremely private. But now I gathered some experiences, some understanding, and today I obviously couldn't care less what people say because I know what I experienced. But for some, especially people new to the spiritual path, it can be damaging to your practice, especially when this sort of devotion and knowing of the higher dimensions of consciousness are not solidified deeply in yourself. And instead of cultivating self-realization, you cultivate self-doubt instead. Remember, your individual expansion of consciousness does not mix with collective consciousness. This is very important to understand. If you are to go beyond the rest of humanity and go to these other worlds that are not related to this collective world we physically live in. So, among all of these colorations, these aspects and traits of the ego manifesting when sharing experiences, there's one specific thing we have to put value in order to make sure we don't lose ourselves too much in the ego when having experiences. And it's this. This is kind of my own way I recognize my own divinity and honor it. We, or rather, the individual I, the personality you call you, does not astral project. Okay? We do not have this ability. The I does not have this ability. Consciousness does. Higher power does. The nature of God is what allows us to enter other worlds. We should honor that and recognize that as a fundamental truth. The ego does not astral project. The ego does absolutely nothing. When the foundation of our very being opens up to the greater reality which is already there, then such experiences of the divine open up. That is all. It is always available, but it is the ego that gets in our way and skews reality with its misperceptions and unconscious dreams. So we do not astral project. The higher power within us does. Our higher self does. That's how you could see it as well. And so you see, if you become a person who says, I am an astral projector. I have this ability. I know how to astral project. I control all of this and make this happen. That is a complete fallacy of the mind. The I does nothing. Astral projection is a completely natural phenomena of consciousness. All that the I does is get in the way. And so if you think I does all of this, thinks it knows how to do it, then it also feels responsibility or weight or a burden to keep up with practicing astral projection. It feels like it has to control everything. And then when you can't astral project on some days, the I starts overthinking, saying things like, oh, this method didn't work on this day because I did this, or I did bad things on this day, so I couldn't do it, etc., right? But the reality is, the I is just making a whole lot of noise to distract you with all of its thoughts, emotions, sense of self. That's the only ever real problem. Now, I know this is all perhaps a little heavy. I'm not saying sharing experiences is always bad. Of course not. And as you know from this channel, I've shared many of my experiences too. For example, swearing is generally considered a bad thing, right? Perhaps even sinful. But really, no, saying bad words, swear words, is not bad. But what's important is the spirit in which we swear. It's the way we swear and how we feel when we say it that determines whether it causes disturbances or negative energies within ourselves or others. In the same way, the spirit of how we share spiritual experiences can detriment our progress through pride, superiority, competitiveness, and other egoic confusions. And just to be clear, it's absolutely fine to share experiences, but we have to always ask why we share them. This is about becoming a more equilibrated and self aware human being. I put the title of this video quite direct because this is not taught anywhere, and I think this is a really important thing to consider, and I have seen it in other people and myself too. So, as a general guideline, when should we share experiences? When we have a genuine calling from our hearts, feelings of love, right, to inspire others, to be of service to others. It may also be to teach and enlighten others. It may also be in the pure act of simply sharing with others, right? To share is a beautiful thing, but many don't share. They boast or are in confusion. That's the point here. And before you share, ask yourself why you are sharing. Is it out of boasting, showing off, pride, or is it a genuine service to humanity to help inspire or enlighten? Or do you also need sincere help that you feel you really need? Usually when I share my own experiences, it's with the intent to inspire or enlighten people about certain things. And you can ask yourself, if you're writing experiences or saying them, ask yourself if someone opposed you, would you feel offended? Who feels offended? Is it your pride? What's really going on here? Are you really enlightened about what you're sharing? So it's a very simple lesson here amongst all of this. Maintain your inner silence. Silence is also a dimension of intelligence in itself. And when we're comfortable in it, it's a gateway to intuition and continuing your practice more deeply. And also some advice to more advanced people on this path, because I know you're out there listening, but don't comment on the videos or anything because there's not much you need to say. Consider this: you, being more advanced, can begin to meet certain masters and guides and attend perhaps secret classes in the astral. They may want to tell you certain things, even secret things. Do you think that they would share those things with you if you were the type of person to pass on their message in a way that they didn't want? Or if you're the type of person to just tell other people's secrets and just blurt out every experience all the time? No, of course they wouldn't. And these type of beings know what kind of person you are even before meeting you. If you're not capable of shutting your mouth after every experience and you have this kind of verbal diarrhea, you are most likely missing the point of your experiences. Practice at least keeping 50% or more of your experiences to yourself. Only share those you genuinely need help with or feel a genuine, sincere calling from your heart to inspire and help others. Check yourself. If you're doing it because of pride, because you want to seem experienced, wise, holier than thou, as they say, then this is not the way, and I can assure you, you will have less experiences as a result. This is not a belief to scare you, this is just a science of the mind. As you can see on the diagram on the screen, we have spiritual practice. We go into higher consciousness by being able to go beyond the ego, but then we descend back into the ego when we feel prideful about our experiences again. And clearly, we need to stay in higher consciousness. And so, yes, if you recognize some of this in yourself and how your ego can become bigger sometimes when you share things with your friends, this is not to be seen as good or bad, but just part of your practice. If you are honest with yourself and feel you have some of these egoic movements within you, simply exercise awareness over it so that it doesn't control you and take root within you all the time going forward. This is just part of our practice. It's part of spiritual growth. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't recognize this and get stuck on the path. So here I am trying to help. And so you can see now, if you have an experience and wake up, try not to be so surprised, fascinated, and hypnotized by the experience, but instead remain impartial, like a Zen monk, as I always say, and just continue practicing. Then you will easily continue to have more experiences. You will stay back in the non egoic higher state of consciousness that allowed you to have those experiences in the first place. And I say all of this as part of the movements and temptations of my own mind too, I make these videos, I'm writing books, and I get questions and praises from people every day, and many say, Gene, you are amazing, wonderful. You have these powers. Bless me with guidance and all of this, And I feel like saying, please just stop, stop giving your energy, stop projecting a sense of divinity to others and not to yourself. I am nothing special. Whatever I've experienced, whatever I've realized or know, you have all of these things within you too. We all hold the same level of God potential because we are all just nothing, right? Insignificant pieces of dust floating in the ocean of cosmic infinity. And so, on this note, as I said at the beginning, be careful of who you share these experiences with. And hence, this is just one reason why I created the private Astral Doorway Patreon and Discord group, so that people can feel safe to share their knowledge and experiences with others who will value them as much as they do. That's how it's designed to be. And as I said earlier, asking people publicly about your experiences isn't the best way to go about it. As I said, you should just continue your practice and those experiences will make sense in time. But if you really genuinely and sincerely need help, then you should ideally ask someone who is more experienced and has the wisdom to give you the proper guidance for you to exercise a deeper understanding about what happened. And of course, that's something I often do for people in the group. Okay, so remember, this entire episode is not just black and white. It's not good or bad. It's not a rule set for you to just not share your experiences. Use self awareness, self observation. If you are coming from an honest and sincere place, then you're probably fine. Okay? This is just to give you mindful tips to stay grounded in your practice so that you can continue to have more astral projection experiences. Many people always ask me, Gene, I only had one experience and can't make it happen again. Well, consider what's been said here, perhaps. Okay? So if you have questions, feel free to ask. Or, as always, if you have some wisdom on this topic too, you're always invited to share with everyone below. And thank you if you've stayed with me throughout this whole thing, listening. It is really hard to keep some explanations concise because I could probably still continue elaborating for a long time. But in any case, thank you, and I will see you on the next episode.